What's up everyone, Jack here and welcome. For the longest time, it felt like we had to choose. If you wanted flagship performance, you bought something with a big widescreen display like the Odin 2 Portal. But if you wanted that authentic retro experience with a proper 4x3 screen, you usually had to give up a lot of power. It was always one or the other. Now it looks like Retroid is trying to change that. They've officially announced the Retroid Pocket Nova, and on paper, this checks almost every box I've been hoping for in a retro-focused handheld. So let's get into it. The first thing that grabbed my attention was the display. Retroid went with a 4.5-inch AMOLED panel in a true 4:3 aspect ratio, and honestly I think that's exactly what a lot of retro gamers have been waiting for. I love widescreen handhelds. My Odin 2 Portal has been fantastic, especially for PSP, Android games, and streaming. But when I'm playing PS2, GameCube, Dreamcast, PS1, or even older systems, these games were just made for a 4:3 aspect ratio screen. Yes, widescreen hacks exist, and some games support them really well, but there are still plenty that don't. Sometimes I'd rather just launch a game and enjoy it the way it was originally designed. That's why the display is such a big deal. Combined with an OLED panel and a solid chipset, this is definitely a contender. Now let's talk about what's powering it. The Nova uses the Qualcomm QCS8550, which is essentially a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 equivalent. At this point, we already know what that level of hardware can do. We're also getting Hall effect sticks, analog triggers, a 5000 mAh battery, fast charging, front-facing speakers, a micro SD card expansion, and of course that OLED 4:3. Now does this replace something like the Odin 2 Portal? Personally, I don't think that's the point. If most of your time is spent playing PSP, Android games, or streaming your PC or PS5, I'd probably still lean towards a widescreen handheld. But if your library is mostly PS2, GameCube, Dreamcast, PlayStation, and everything before that, I can absolutely see why someone would choose the Nova instead. At this point, it's not about having the most powerful handheld, but having that chipset power is a nice touch. The 8GB RAM and 128GB storage model starts at $229, while the 12GB RAM version comes in at $269. Considering you're getting flagship class performance paired with an OLED display, I think Retroid priced this pretty well. It's certainly not cheap, but it also doesn't feel overpriced for what you're getting. Looking at everything Retroid has announced so far, I think they've made a really compelling handheld. I do think that this fills a gap that's been missing for a while now. Premium Android handheld that's built around the way retro games were actually meant to be played. Now, obviously, we'll have to wait for the full reviews before we know if it lives up to the hype, but based on what we've seen so far, this is definitely a handheld I'll be keeping a close eye on. And if I am to get one, it would be my dedicated hardware to run all of those systems I used to play on a CRT TV. And I'll definitely get that Crystal one or that GameCube colorway one. What about you guys? Is the Retroid Pocket Nova something you're considering, or are you passing up on this one? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll catch you in the next one. This is Gamer Jack. I'm out.